Good morning. Welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with the one, the only, the Tommy, the amazing Seth Bauer, and just Data Mike.
And the one and only Data Mike. How's that?
Ta-da-ta-da.
You need much more than that, Mike. You can't just
I can't
big
just
ones for
yeah.
I mean, and then and at the last
And Mike
as
and
my
Mike.
breath is
Mike hanging out with really good people, like smart
Mike.
people. Excellent. Welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast. We appreciate everyone who's showing up today. We've got some good topics for today. Any kind of introduction things? There's some announcements that are coming out from Microsoft here recently.
We got Microsoft Build.
It's coming up.
Or the launch event.
Yes. It's going to be on May 23rd and 24th. I believe there's a in-person days as well. So it's digital and in-person as well. I think since the pandemic, they've kind of like done a hybrid now. They're trying to do more of these hybrid events, which I think are really cool. And I think it's a good way of doing it. So are you guys thinking of going to the Microsoft Build conference? Yeah, crickets. That would be a no. I'd like to go. So there's an MVP summit, I believe, coming up in April for MVPs to go back to Microsoft and talk to the product teams and see what's going on. I, however, have been double booked and I can sadly not make it. So I won't be able to make it back to Seattle, which I'm very disappointed around. Wish I was able to plan my schedule a little bit better, but things have been in motion and so I won't be able to make it. However, now that I'm not going back in April, thinking maybe I can sneak out there for May for a little bit. I got some friends out in the area, so maybe I could go visit some friends as well and make it a little bit longer of a trip just to say hello. Every year, though, they seem to do a lot of really big announcements at Build. I'm anticipating probably a lot more of really good announcements and things that Microsoft is doing. There's got to be like a whole half a day around just Chat GPT. What's going on there?
So I mean, Build is much more of a developer-focused conference, right?
That's true. It's true.
They have had some Power Platform things in there, but it's going to be mostly specific around probably embedding and different things you can do with it in applications, I think. But you're right. Huge announcements there. I will be in Seattle, so I'll miss you during the summit. That's good. That stinks, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. Life happens.
Not necessarily Power BI related, but have you guys seen the new update to Gerhard Bruckel's tool? Databricks Power Tool.
Yes, I saw the update. I didn't get to read the full blog around it.
Apparently, like there's already Git integration with Copilot.
Oh my gosh!
So it's like it helps you like write code. So like fun.
The whole tool was renamed.
Yeah,
right. Because Databricks came up with their own VS extension as well, and so now this is just Power Tools for Databricks. Which Gerhard is amazing. His code is incredible, and there's so much stuff that it does. It like connects to your cluster. I believe you can even run notebooks or Jupyter notebooks locally from a cluster that's remotely enabled. So that's kind of stinking sweet. I was actually thinking about Databricks the other day, and I don't know if you can do this or not. It'd be nice if you could localize a cluster on your current computer to do testing and not have to use a cluster that's from the cloud. So, for example,
using cloud cluster costs. Yeah.
Well, cloud clusters cost money. I have to turn it on. But if I'm doing like development mode, right? I mean, it'd be really nice to like mimic a cluster locally because I've got a computer that's got tons of cores. Why not buy a computer that has a lot of extra cores, pay for the cost of those cores? Again, this is the difference between on-prem and cloud, right? On-prem, you buy the cores outright initially and you own them. You can do whatever you want with them. You can use them to 100%, no big deal. As soon as you go to the cloud, you don't have to pay for those cores to do things. So I was thinking, well, what a better way to optimize would be to like run things like what Gerhard has made, right? In these Databricks notebooks, run them locally, get what I want out of them, just connect the blob storage via a storage account or get my Delta tables. And then I don't have to use any compute in the cloud. I can just figure things out locally. Again, I'm transferring a lot of data at that point, but okay, that's going to be probably cheaper than running a core. Maybe. I don't know. It's just interesting. I'd just see how that would go. I probably am missing a lot of very technical details here that just would not work.
Well, they're not making any money.
Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, Michael's buying server racks to put in his basement so he can save like $5 on Azure.
Yeah, right. But Mike,
do not open that closet.
Yeah, don't. Why is it so hot down here? It's like
$5. I'm saving $5 every day.
every day, and I have free heating all day long. The basement's always warm.
But
Yeah, our air conditioning.
Yeah, right.
Is he growing weed in the basement? No, that's just his massive server because he doesn't want to run Databricks in the cloud. Like, come on.
Oh my
He
god.
also switched to SharePoint server.
Yeah, I was thinking if we on-prem SharePoint as well, it might actually save us some money there as well. So maybe I'll do that as well.
You run Outlook on-prem.
Outlook on-prem. But we're technology just swings, right? It goes from one way to the other and one way to the other now. So I'm just going to localize everything. That is the way. God, that was a joke. That is not the way. Anyways, sorry, we were joking too much about Databricks, but excellent tool. Very excited to get into it, and I'm an avid Databricks user. So this tool has been pretty much a workhorse for me as I use Databricks things and you get more into the code of what's occurring. And you said there's a really neat Git integration too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's automatically checking things, notebooks in and out of Git for you.
Yeah.
Does that work with the Databricks Git? I mean, is it the same? Does it like feel the same from both?
I don't know. I haven't played a ton with his tool yet.
Okay.
For the most part,
extension.
I leave the heavy development to my developers.
Yeah.
Seth
True.
just plays and stays up to date.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, this is neat. This is interesting. You guys should learn this.
Yeah, right. Found this new thing today. Ooh, this would solve this problem.
Exactly right.
Speaking of problems.
Problems.
What are we talking about today?
Ooh.
Today's topic, and I got to pull it up because Tommy's sending me articles here. There was another. He sent me a.
Well,
sorry,
we were talking about build, and then we went right to Databricks. I'm like,
I'm sorry.
On the Microsoft PowerBI blog.
It's how we do.
I apologize. Tommy sent me the Explore the new capabilities in Microsoft Power BI at the Microsoft Business Applications launch event. That was another one.
I'm not interested. There's no Databricks in the article. Moving.
Exactly. I don't see any Databricks, so not good. But apparently there's another event coming that was just announced yesterday, March 22nd, from Kim Manis. Which kudos, Kim. You're doing good work on the team and the product. I love where you're going with things. So keep up the good work. It'll be April 4th, 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. So I believe it's just like a one-day event. It's their launch event. So I think is it only online, Tommy?
Yeah. So they've been doing this thing the last few years where they have like a pre-event for the event.
I like it.
So
it's like a pre-party for the Brewers game. You do a little pre-partying before we get to the actual Brewers game.
Is it though, or isn't the business applications launch event like that's the one that it's much more business focused?
Yeah,
it's very salesy, I would say.
More business focused.
Yeah, I enjoy more technical conferences in general because I think I've gotten over like the salesy stuff. Like you sold me Microsoft. I know it's going to be. I know I want to use it.
Oh no, this isn't for you. This is for Wall Street. So.
Yeah. I mean, this is like I think there's value. There's value in here just from across the spectrum. Some of the highlights of tools. Yeah. These usually leave me falling into where you are, Mike. Where it's I want you just showed me that, but like, what does it do? Like, what is it really doing? Like, how do I really integrate that? How does it plug into all these other things on the back end? And it's like, to me, it's very superficial. Which is there has to be conferences or announcements like that.
Yes.
So
I would totally agree.
Way, AI innovations is part of that. So maybe I do tune in because a lot of fun stuff they're integrating all over the place.
I do want to address one quick question here that came from the chat here from LinkedIn. Someone asks, as we're doing intros and things here, where can I learn Power BI functions with examples? Go to dax.guide.com. Every function you need to know is there with examples, linking to articles. And then when you want to test your experience, you go to dax.do. So dax.guide and dax.do are your two handles you want to use in order to go learn more about DAX functions directly. And that will really help. So dax.guide and dax.do. Those are your two websites that you want to go check out. Sorry. Greg Baldini, you crack me up. Catching up on 2x. Mike is now just learning that buying hardware is cheaper than buying utilization when it's high. Yes, Greg, I am now coming full circle. and I went to then buy all the VMs and put them locally on my machine. Let's just do VMware on my local machine from now on. Anyways, sorry.
Hadoop and Spark clusters, and you're going to custom build it all on your local machines.
Yep, everything. Yeah, because I don't have enough. I have too much time on my hands, and I need to spend it on something important, such as building an on-prem data center. Yeah. Yes, infrastructure. This is the new thing. You're going to make a ton of money in infrastructure.
It is the way.
It is the way. Oh boy. All right. Well, this is going to be a punchy episode. I can see it already. So today's question or topic around today is, how do you define the business problem? Let's take it away from there. Let's kind of set up, the problem or the problem statement. When working with a technical individual or technical lead for Power BI or building reports, we have to integrate with the business side of things, figure out what's happening inside your question. What kind of information do you need about the data that we're generating? So yeah, let's go through that one. Let's kick off some ideas here. Tom, you want to give us kind of a little round out here about where you're thinking this should go?
So I think some of the scenarios of the origin of this is when you think of the normal relationship between BI and departments. Usually it's create a report. We're looking at, our sales, we're looking at our products, and maybe they have a few things that they're tracking, but generally speaking, there are always a lot of times like some of the base metrics, like year to date, previous year, maybe it's tied to a target or goal. And I think a lot of times the BI team can do a lot more in terms of asking, I don't want to say tough questions, but trying to define, in a sense, more context for the department. For example, whereas, I can show you your sales over time, but that's not game changing every week, or that doesn't necessarily change week to week where it's going to be impactful for the business. Whereas, does the BI team have a responsibility to really go through a report request and going through like, hey, what are your thresholds? What are the things that, in a sense, you don't want to see change? And let's define, in a sense, your positive and negative for you. It may not necessarily be like corporate goals, but there are things that, in a sense, will be something that the business and that team or department can really conceptualize. Like, hey, we're going to notify you when things are 5% lower or 10%. And I think my question is, and I think the origin is that the BI team's role, and how do we go about that? Because we're not normally seen in that light. The BI team's not. It's usually show me the data.
I feel like you're alluding to there's two kind of main thoughts. I think you're talking about descriptive information, which is describing what happened historically. And what I think we want to start getting to is to get to the prescriptive side of things. What should we do? And I think that is the ultimate goal of moving, let's call it data culture in organization, from where they are to where they want to be. And I think there's some very strong prerequisites that need to be in place in order you to get to like the predictive or the prescriptive side of things. So there's this. We would talk to this with clients. We had this maturity curve, right? At the beginning of the curve, you have this. We're only looking historically. We're always looking backwards and saying, what did we do? How did we perform? We said we were going to do X number of dollars per month, or we're going to sell a number of units, whatever that is. How did we perform against that number? The next part you start thinking about is looking forward. What should we be doing? What does the projection look like? And so now you're taking inputs like, what does the sales pipeline look like? How many leads are we getting? What is and then we start doing things in like dynamics where we start to score the quality of a lead, right? Looking forward and trying to project what could be. And then there's the upper echelon of this. Now you have a bunch of data and now you're being predictive, right? So instead of, subscribing things, you're actually telling people what to do, right? And what I'm saying predictive would be is a good example. You go to Amazon, you pick up, you're looking for like a new camera, right? For your computer, you Google that camera, you put it in there, Amazon, boom, got it. What happens is there's a whole bunch of other recommended products. It's prescribing to you based on you as a person and your buying history. These are other comparable products that they recommend you should do. So I think at some point you want to build reports you should go by. You should be, we want the BI teams to start predicting or telling you, okay, you should spend another $10,000 on marketing because that's going to get you to your goal.
Isn't it flipped though? Like descriptive is past. I thought predictive is what could happen. Like you're using some inputs to kind of
Maybe I got it
generally
wrong.
show like where, and then prescriptive is like this is what should happen.
Oh, yeah. I think I got the words mixed up there. Yes, you're right. But it's like, what did happen? What should you do? Or what could, I don't know, whatever.
What is like or likely?
Yes.
Like potential. Like we kind of have a feeling versus, you know, we're locking in. We've run things through models and like
Yes.
over and over. We're much more on the prescriptive side. Like that's the hard stuff to generate from a data perspective.
And the reason I think that's hard, and I think this is kind of the heart of the conversation, is
it just takes more work.
Yeah, well, because I think a lot of times, even on the predictive side, in order for you even to get to the predictive side, you know, there's the context that's really needed that I think a lot of times the business may not have, in a sense, for every single request, unless you're dealing with, you know, target numbers, right? But a lot of times our reports don't necessarily have always like a target, or in a sense, the context of we're doing marketing, so we're looking at our ad cost. So that's something to track. But I think there's another layer here where I think really BI should be helped more engaging in terms of where's the boundaries that you would deem successful or not over a certain period. And I think that's the part where people don't expect us to do, or that's not usually part of our scope, because what happens is, to your point with data culture, then it becomes to owning those numbers in a sense of direct example here. We'll say the ad spend, right? It's like, well, we're going to add some boundaries here to say, you know, whenever you're below a certain or like above a certain cost per click, you know, that's in the red. Well, the thing is now someone's going to be in a sense responsible for that and accountable for that. So that's where it's most impactful. But I think a lot of times we as the BI team are not responsible for coming up with that or working on that.
Oh, no way. I would agree with you there.
I think,
okay.
So to dive into, I think where you're trying to go, right? Yes, I think it is the BI team's responsibility to dive in and help business users solve some of these challenging problems, right? Above and beyond them saying, I just need access to data. We've talked about this before to some degree. If we're still in the I need access to data, that could be like step one. Great. Let me give you access to data. The follow-up to this is we can really help you and assist you in gaining insights from this data. So don't go down a very manual route of creating your own reports or whatever, because we have data sets that support this, obviously, and we can help facilitate this conversation of solving your business problem, right? So in terms of definition, I think I've said this in some ways when dealing with high pressure situations, but I think it's also very relevant to think through from the get-go for the BI person, right? And I think this is where you're driving, like, what are the things we can do as a team? And I think that obviously the first is empathy, right? We're going to listen to them and what are the particular areas they're struggling in. And the three key parts that were taught to me that work in this scenario in that initial conversation, as well as high pressure, are these three things. What are they seeing? What are the actions they took to solve their problems? And what is the impact that it is having on the business or their area? And by focusing in on those and putting my biases aside, those three things, typically all you're doing is absorbing, right? What are they seeing going on in their business? Like, here's a struggle. Like we're hemorrhaging money and we don't know why. Okay. What are the actions you've taken to solve this problem? Okay. We looked at this data set. We've been analyzing it for 3 days. Like we were doing these things, and what the actions that they've taken are going to lead you to understand what actions you don't have to take, right?
Yeah.
Because you're there to help them solve it. Some of this, I'm creating a really like barn burner scenario, but like the vast majority of reporting is not like that. It's just to provide more insights, but you could look at it the same way because it's a black hole right now. And then what is the impact that that's having on them in their organization or their area or their role? And then that, like, these things help to shape the conversation in their mind about what we're trying to do when we start asking all of our questions, right? Because this, to me, is the first part of all groups really getting their heads around what is the problem and why we're talking about this report request in this way. And then it helps facilitate like the next line of questioning that's going to like derive from that, where we've talked about like me wanting to understand what visualizations I need to create, what business logic needs to be applied, any of the, filters, slicers, how are they going to interact with the report, things like that. But like, to me, it first starts with that initial discussion. And I think using these three kind of areas and questions puts a nice framework for me to provide context to myself and help facilitate where do you go with some of those questions that outcome in like produce hopefully a really valuable report that they can action off of.
I'm looking at the chat here, and there's some really good questions around, in the lens of defining the business problem. This is, I think, another really good topic around what this looks like. It says, do you use things like a tech spec? Do you use things that require sign off on the requirements to build the thing? Or do you have stuff like you use things like DevOps or cards? And so I'm going to lens this a little bit for how I think it depends on the size of your organization and how much structure you need. I think if you are a smaller organization, I think Microsoft Planner is a adequate way of being able to basically Kanban tasks together. So be able to talk to the business, gather the business requirements. Again, to your point, Seth, the conversation you're having, right? We have a report requirement. Great. Let's have there's a couple of things we need to do to get through this. We need to talk to the business. We need to ask what the usage is. How do you use this report? What value is this providing to you? Walk me through show me how. And then I think in more formal organizations, you move away from like a planner type thing and you actually move into like a ticketing system. And you have you either borrow one from IT or make your own, or you start using things like DevOps where ticketed items automatically funnel into DevOps and get created as tasks for people to work on. So when we're talking about defining the business problem, and I'm bringing up these tooling things because one of the things I find when we define the business problem, I feel like there's a lot of back and forth in defining the business problem. And you really want to get to a report that's very quick to deliver so that people can react to something. Because I feel like a lot of the times I'm feeling like I'll give you a report and they're like, well, that's not what we wanted. But you didn't know what you wanted. You didn't have anything to react to. You basically said, here's what I think my needs are. And then when we produce a report based on constrictions, based on what data do we have available, what visualizations can we actually put in front of you, the requirements kind of change. So it becomes more of an iterative process. So having a formalin process where you capture what they wanted, and you can say, look, here, we did what you wanted. You asked for these things. We delivered these things. You can get into this really bad area of scope creep where no one trusts the data, the reports don't look right, and then you go through multiple iterations on a report because people didn't understand, like, I gave you what you asked for, but you didn't understand how to ask the question correctly, or we didn't talk about the definition of what you want to produce action-wise, or you couldn't articulate it yet. But I think after a couple iterations, you get much closer to the end goal.
That is absolutely part of it. But what I think for us, though, there's a point there, even with the tooling, and you might have, like, in a sense, like your tech spec, where I find a lot of departments, they haven't calibrated what I call their pressure points. So, and I think that's a big part of.
Can you define those pressure points, you mean?
Yeah. So pressure points are going to be the high and low in terms of someone being successful at their job or a project that they're doing and not. And where is those points where someone in a sense would, freak out if they were to see a certain number, or like the extremes here is like what would cause someone to get promoted or fired, so to speak. And obviously then calibrate that down into, in a sense, a certain index of, where should we be monitoring? Where should you be? And I think a lot of times when people come with a report request, they don't necessarily have those already defined. Like, we want to look at new prospects that come in. Okay, we can absolutely show you that, and we can show you that on a weekly basis. At what point, if there's a influx of prospects, is that considered successful? What does that mean? And where's that, in a sense, cutoff point in terms of particular metrics? To me, that's a game changer from a report just being like, okay, cool, interesting, great. And now someone, in a sense, has some, in a sense, accountability around those numbers.
I think that dovetails a bit in helping them define objectives and key results, even though they may not exist, right? Like, just because
the diet version,
the generation of the report should not be the report itself should not be the end goal. The end goal should be providing you with the information you need to understand whether or not you're on track, or whether or not you're within these bounds, right?
Right.
So helping them define those, I guess, is something that we do have to encounter, which is also why, like, a lot of times, if you can't have this conversation, step one is I'll give you access to the data. And then it's almost like a BI team directive, though, that they should be the ones that follow up and not just leave it at that, because otherwise you can just spool off virtuous waste. I do want to dovetail back on Mike's comments, though, with how we answer, like, do we use requirements and specifications? Because I think what we're mainly talking about right now is how do we engage with the business to define requirements on some level, versus that question is kind of how do I manage the execution? Because and the follow-up to that is, we have a saying that we coined a long time ago: think like the business, act like IT.
Yep.
So yes, I am a huge advocate for having a standardized process of how you go and execute. So building, like, how I have those conversations in my world reflects to, I create a work item, right, in whatever system. When I'm having these conversations, I treat that as a pre-grooming. I'm flushing out all of the details between that business user and myself, and we're going to talk about, like, some of the big challenges or things that we can and can't do. And then I bring that person to my team and we groom it. That is where that person describes in this work item, and technically they're the ones that should be owning this, and that detail should be in there, because we need to Nico, unpack all of the details within this request for the team. And we're talking reports that could be a page, 2 pages, 3, it doesn't matter, right? They need to understand, like, what is being requested, the value behind it, and you're conveying that to them in those, quote unquote groomings, which is what in dev cycles, this is what we do. And then when the team understands, like, what the request is, all the things, they can say, okay, I'm going to estimate my work part of that. Like, and at the end of the day, the work item should have a full estimated plan of, like, how long we think it's going to take. And then you schedule it. Now there's expectation setting on both sides, like the business owner or whomever is requesting the report is either getting handheld through that process, or you're the owner of that process and you're just bringing them along for the ride to describe these things. But ultimately, at the end of that meeting, there's the business user now knows how long it's going to take for us to develop this thing that they're asking for. These are the requirements that we are going to go build. And then the schedule is going to be, hopefully sprints, right? Like, it's going to get done in this week, or it's going to get done in the next 2 weeks. Yes. We're going to schedule it in this week. And your expectation as a business owner is that you'll have this report in your hands by this time. And then it's my responsibility to go execute on that. And that gets rid of a lot of what I think people struggle with that in the business side, where they don't have that structure and everything just pours in. Right. And you have, like, you're just swamped with requests and people thinking you're not doing your job because you haven't created that structure that allows you to execute and succeed in that environment. And you don't need to do this within systems, although it's much, much easier. But managing on any level to set expectations between teams is the only way I've found that you can succeed long term. Back to Mike's point, because otherwise, one person in one request, they will take all of your time. All of your hey, I like what you built, but now I want this page. Like, I'm sorry, man, you're going to the back of the line, right?
You're next.
That's a new request.
Yeah, that's a new request. So I do feel like there's a minimum here of around like, by defining the business problem adequately and scoping it well, you can regularly deliver back to the business something that is, initially adding some value, but then you also can, shed that burden of additional work over and over again.
So that's obviously part of the report development, but let me ask you guys this. Is there more of a responsibility in terms of part of that iterative process where, like Mike, to your point, they may not know the data. So we'll provide, at least on the first onset, that exploratory side of it.
Yes.
But I think, does that lead to us having the conversation on, okay, now kind of let's explore the context or the boundaries of what success looks like in terms of the business may not have, in a sense, success metrics. They may just have metrics. And even if it's not a full OKR framework, but I think in a sense, going to the ownership of, we're looking at your member count, or we're looking at your prospects over time. Now we're going to basically do that red green, like what is considered success, what is not considered successful in terms of what you're looking at. And I like, a lot of times that's the business requiring it. They may already have that. But I think my question is, what about when they don't? Should a BI play a bigger part in helping define those with them?
I mean, I think if you're going to win as a BI department or team, you're going to need to push back on some of those things. Now, I think there's a due diligence on the BI leads or BI developers to try to communicate, okay, there are deeper insights. So one thing that I use a lot when I'm teaching my classes at UWM around Power BI is, think of your data model as this massive table, or let's liken your data model to an Excel document. There's this huge table with 1 million rows in it. How do you find relevant information across that 1 million rows, or even 500,000 rows, right? 500,000 rows of data in your Excel file. You can't physically look at all the information. There's no possible way for you to pick out what information is relevant to you. So you're always thinking about, how can I aggregate and roll up something to some level? And so, yes, you have this massive data set, but maybe like 10 rows are of actual importance, right? Those are the accounts that have been lost.
Right.
Maybe 15 rows are the accounts that are buying less than they have in the previous quarter, or whatever that may be, right? So all the data is not relevant. What you're trying to identify is, where is the most impact on the information? And this is one of the things that was beaten to my head when I went through Delta Associates and the training that they provided. I think they call it a black belt in data analytics. And they were focused on the category management. But category management comes with a lot of data. If you imagine, category management helps you, an example here. You are like a Walmart, right? And you sell products. You have a variety of products that you're selling on store shelves. Maybe you're like a spark plug provider, K&G or something like that. If you're providing spark plugs to cars, which ones are selling the most profitable, and which ones is it marketing? Is it placement on the shelves? There's so many variables. Are you first in the store? Where are you being placed? There's so many variables that go along with this. And then you have the ability of understanding, like, what is your market share? So there are other deeper metrics that are telling your business if you're winning, and having those conversations. The BI team needs to be educated on these spaces. You have to really go learn these things and figure out where this comes from, because purely showing a bar chart with the total number of sales, that is good, but a better way would be let's calculate the difference between your sales and the goal, or let's calculate your cumulative 12-month rolling numbers compared to this year to last year, and then display or distribute the difference between this year's and last year's cumulative sum. Right? Now you're looking at numbers that are much more marginal. They're much easier to read, and we're not looking at numbers that are like bar charts that have massive, like $12 million ranges, and they're so like, I love it when you see charts that the changes between each bar is so minute, you can't even see the difference. So to me, that's the wrong visual for what you're trying to convey. And so that deeper thought, BI team should be leading that, should be thought leaders in that. and should be finding out and seeking out examples that help you think about that way deeper.
So I love that point, and that I think that goes in. There's a big difference between showing market share and in terms of where should you be or what were you expecting. There's a book I swear by that was a game changer for me. Is from someone named Doug Hubbard. It's called How to Measure Anything.
Oh yeah, I
And
think you've talked about this before a couple of times. Yeah,
and it's something that I try to visit very often because it goes the idea of that calibration of, you know, in a sense, kind of where should you expect to be, or really like again, where are those in a sense boundaries? Now, here's the thing I want to touch on that I think is important. From we can go through the scoping process, but what happens though in terms of, you know, when we all of a sudden go to the business, go, okay, yeah, we can just show your numbers or we'll do market share, but now we're in a sense challenging them to come up with and again those pressure points, right?
I'm sorry, Tommy. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right.
I'm not trying to interrupt. I just Googled the book, How to Measure Everything. And I'm like, this thing looks a little childish. It's a kid's book. I think you mean How to Measure Anything,
That's
right?
what I said.
Okay, I Googled the wrong thing. And I'm like, I've got this kid's book, How to Measure a Giraffe, How to Measure a bouncy ball. I'm like, Tommy, this seems like third grade math. I'm not sure this is the book you want to recommend.
So helpful.
My bad. I was Googling the wrong. How to Measure Anything. I was like, okay, Hubbard, I see it. The one I was finding was How to Measure Everything by DK. I was like, this is not right. It's a little bit flashy. There's literally like rulers and measuring sticks all over the whole thing. Got it. Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh.
Is this from Scholastics? Yeah.
Scholastics, yes. I just got a bonus. I'm gonna get it from the Scholastics.
Yeah. Jeez. Well, the one point I want to ask you guys, because I think is probably a little more prominent. A lot of times the BI isn't responsible for, in a sense, helping create those measurements or helping calibrate. And I think the reason why is that I don't think we're all of a sudden going into someone else's domain, and all of a sudden we're defining a sense of success for them. And I've seen that people take that as, in a sense, like a challenge, or we're attacking them trying to do this. And maybe that's part of data literacy, but do you guys see, in a sense, where we can't just go in guns blazing, going, let's create your, your context here. Let's create your success. And they're going to go, whoa, like, I don't want to showcase this, or because that's not a corporate goal. In a sense, does that make sense what I'm saying? Am I making
it does, but
can
I
you
think,
prompt?
well,
Yeah.
I think what I'm hearing is the BI team, and it's going to be, when we say that, I would say it's usually one or two individuals. It's not going to be all the developers. It's not going to be all the people that develop that can have these sorts of conversations. If you need to calibrate onto a business unit, like, it is your experience with data and helping people solve their problems that's going to help drive a conversation where you understand what their big objectives are. Or, to your point, Tommy, where it sounds like you're almost trying to level them up to think about their business in a more insightful, data-driven way, which could absolutely be the case. And I guess maybe that's where you're driving.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. So
I think that is absolutely one of those collaborative effort kind of things, but I still take my same three things that I like. Tell me about your business. Like, what do you do? What are you seeing? Like, what is your day-to-day look like? What are you responsible for? What are all the things that are the big drivers for your area? i.e., what are the expectations people have from you, right? What are the things you do on a daily basis, right? These are the actions that they're taking. What are you thinking about, and how you solve, like, whatever the issue is you're having, or how do you get insights across? Do you manage your business area? Are we doing a monitoring report for you so that you can understand all of, like, what's going on in your ecosystem? And what is the impact of not having this? Like, what are you doing, or how is this report or what my assistant's going to help you engage in solving these problems, right? Like, that's the baseline. And then you bring, and that's what I said earlier, like, that's the baseline that gives us the framework for the conversation. So I think where you're driving is, in areas where either people don't know or don't have clear definitions of their own objectives, our being data driven people, yes, can absolutely help facilitate that conversation. Where it does get muddy is who owns the objective, right?
Mhm.
And I think
That's a
like
bigger challenge, I
ultimately
think.
the business unit does, and it's not my job to tell them what their objective is. It's my job to Mike's point earlier, figure out like, hey, great, you're asking for sales, right? But when we were talking about like what people really care about you, it's the up down of sales, right? Like it's what happened between last month and this month, right? Like how do you figure that out? Oh, well, what I would do is I'd look at your bar chart, but then I'd export the raw data and then I would like figure out what the difference is or
Mhm.
how, do you know? I can just provide that to you. Like here, we'll show you what the actual are, but if you click this button or see this visual, this shows you actually the difference in sales between last month and this month. Or if you want to change date range, we can do this. And that's where like I think you really start to hit the value prop of building reporting for people because you're specifically building things to help them solve those larger problems. Because at the end of the day, like a particular report and the requirements for it would be like what are the questions that this report is trying to answer. The question for this would be like this what is the difference in sales, month over month or by like in a time range. Okay, great. Like we're going to answer that question and I've engaged with that unit, like that business owner, to clarify specifically how we're going to represent that in the report. So I think definitely this dialogue can drive for better objectives and are providing key results for them, like allowing them to understand and make these decisions quickly. But we don't own them.
And I think you hit a home run with that explanation there. I mean, that is one exactly what I was trying to ask, but it's defining the baseline because when you do that, as soon as you define the base, what happens is now you are going to be measured against that. And again, um, is that our role, or should we be playing a bigger part in doing that and creating a baseline if there is none? And not, and again, not just for the entire model, but for the certain metrics that they're looking at.
Yeah, I think you're conflating like what I mean by my baseline means I'm my baseline for a frame of reference to understand their
Mhm.
business. It's not a baseline for me to say this is where you start.
Okay.
But in order for us to effectively provide something of value to them, like we need to understand this, albeit on a like on a finite level, right? And the other point I was going to make here is I think this also varies depending on who the report builders are. Because if I'm BI team and I'm interacting with many different business units, I have slim glimpses, and when I engage with these groups, I solve problems. Versus an analyst or somebody in the business unit that is deeply analyzing the data that could have like these sorts of conversations, but they understand the business behind it a lot more, and they might actually help like that might actually help them drive this conversation better. Either way, when I say baseline, it's just to create the framework to provide something. The business owner or the report requester owns that thing. Like the output of data and the insights we're providing to them should make
Yes.
their job easier. But if
Yes.
somebody's coming for who's responsible, it's them. It's not me.
Yes.
I'm just the provider of like outside of data accuracy,
I'm just a
right? Like
messenger.
correct.
Yeah.
I've helped facilitate an organization make faster, better decisions and data-driven decisions as
Mhm.
opposed to somebody, like trying to compile all these numbers and do it on their own without context.
I think I think also in here when we're talking about the business problems, you're trying to work with the business to help them understand what the business problem is. You're the liaison between what the data is doing and to what the report is outputting. You technically don't want to own any of the internals of it, right? We want other people to own the measure creation, what's defining, what measures success. That's on the business to define. We're just kind of playing that bridge between what the data is doing and what IT is doing. And this is also another thing that you're going to start hearing, I think, in the near term here is you're going to need to start engaging more with what is data ops, operationalizing your data. What does data drift look like? As the data changes over time, is there a schema drift on that data? If there's bad or injected values that are incorrect, I think data ops is going to become an increasingly important topic, and I'm hearing a lot more people talk about it because as people are engaging with their Power BI models, you run the risk of losing data because you changed a measure, or you didn't run the partitions correctly, or something changed upstream. You need the same rigor at what DevOps does, but for the data. And so there's some tools that I see appearing in the marketplace, some around Databricks. And Microsoft's really good at finding like large problems and solving those problems. I'd like Microsoft to start attacking more of this data ops problem. How can I more aptly go through and publish a report and or data set and know that the data is accurate? And again, to your point earlier, Seth, right? We're the middleman in this scenario. If the data is wrong, the data is wrong. I can't fix it. Like someone else has to go back into the upstream system and fix it. Or I have to add a new process to do data cleansing before it gets to the report. At the end of the day, you need clean and good data at the report level. So I think this is another topic that goes along with this business problem, is we're trying to help identify what it is, but we're pushing back to the other teams that either own the back-end systems and making sure that the business side owns the KPIs and metrics that are coming out of it. This is why quality assurance is so important, to do checks with the business.
Yeah, I think that also drives to like the pre-grooming conversations around people's expectations, right? Where there are absolutely cases where something that they need to provide the most valuable insight requires other business areas to start inputting data or like fix some data, or like there's a core problem with the information we're able to provide to you, and it starts with the business or a business process that has to be created for us to provide this insight to you. One thing I was thinking about that like I haven't done, back to your baseline comment, Tommy, is I think it would be really valuable, although I haven't practiced this, to actually, as the leader typically, or the lead person that's engaging in these initial conversations with like, call it pre-grooming for specific reports. That's also where you get a lot of the broad understanding of a business unit. And I think it'd be really valuable to have like a business problems documentation area, which would almost be a cheat sheet for the devs or other people that are integrating with business areas as they are requesting reports, because it would provide all that context, right? So you wouldn't have to have the same conversation, albeit roles change within business units. But think about the wealth of knowledge you'd have around a particular business area if it's not just the area you're in, you know?
I really like that. And I that's part, I think, of the data literacy maturity that I think is so important, that framework, because it's amazing to me that we're called business intelligence. But I think that's gotten confused with just like data engineers or data modeling, where again, it's like just spit out the numbers. And I would challenge, like, I think we need to we should be playing a bigger role of not just visualizing and modeling data. And that's where a lot of our focus is. But I think part of what the intelligence is helping, again, measure those important things and measure what matters. A great example here in terms of how this can be making an impact, and it's a little off, but I think you'll see how it kind of ties in.
Okay.
But for basically 80 years in baseball, they measured three main numbers that you would say was a good player or success.
Can I guess it? Can I guess what they are?
Can
we guess what these things? Because this is Michael, Mr. Sports, who knows a lot about sports things. All right, three main numbers in baseball. I would say it would be their number of hits they made, and then I'm already wrong. Okay, Seth, your turn to make your turn to lose one. All right, Seth, your turn.
What the three metrics that
metrics that they used to use in baseball to see if they were good or not.
To see if a player was good or not.
Yep.
Strikeouts.
So we'll say for the batter, let's just focus on the batter.
Okay, just the
batting average, RBIs, and basically
and their height. Yes.
Home run, yes, and
Oh,
their
okay.
height.
No.
So, but you basically say if the player was good,
So-
it was going to be like their RBIs, their home runs, and their on base,
Yeah.
and the home runs. So like
Yep.
power, contact, and the whole Moneyball idea when that
Yes.
came out. So
Tom
that
Cruise. I don't know who was it? Who was the Moneyball guy?
Billy Bean, but Brad.
I
The
know.
movie was Brad
Who's the
Pitt.
actor who played
Brad
him?
Pitt, yeah.
It was a Brad Pitt. Oh,
Yeah.
the other guy.
So
Yes.
what made, in a sense, for 80 years, baseball was looking at these three numbers as a gauge of player success.
Yep.
What basically the concept was, they realized our goal is not to win games, it's to score, it's to score runs, and the way you score runs, you get people on base. Therefore, I don't care if people don't get hits, but if they get walked or if they get on base, that's the only thing that matters. So that was completely changed, because you may have a lot of players who they're slow, they don't hit for power, but they get on base more than that guy that they would consider successful. That's exactly what Moneyball did, was basically completely change around to basically what's called on base percentage. And that's basically tied down to the success. Even though for 80 years they looked at these three numbers, everything changed. And does that make sense? I don't know.
So you're saying, I guess what you're outlining for me though is like this is a foundational misconception, right? Like where industries go at like everybody is measuring by this stick. But I think what that alludes to is the importance of going over and thinking through whether or not we're doing the things the right way, or do we have to refactor and figure out like different ways to solve problems better. I think that's what it alludes to me.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
I know you're losing it.
I'm losing it right now. Okay. You can tell how much Michael watches movies and pays attention to baseball because the chat is ripping me apart. They're like, Tom Cruise, right, good job. And I'm thinking to myself, what would Tom Cruise be like if he was in Moneyball? I'd be like, bump, 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 statistics, bump, 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 data, bump, 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 home runs. Like, I don't know how it would work.
Matt, Mike,
He'd be repelling from this. He'd be repelling from the ceiling of the baseball stadium and jumping in and be like, oh, I got it. I don't know.
Hey, Mike. What does Chat GPT say about solving business problems?
Oh, that's a good question. I have a question teed up here. I think so. It's time for Chat GPT. I don't know. We're still working on the intro.
Trying.
Yeah. So I thought we should nominate Seth. What would you do, Seth? What would be your intro?
To come up with something.
Yeah,
come up with an intro.
Chat with the AI.
Some sort of beatbox.
Yeah, we need a little, something there. Good segue, Seth.
Yeah.
Let's move off of Michael's random idea.
It's on course here.
Let's keep.
It's a creaky
one. So, anyways, the question is, how would you define a business problem? And then this is maybe a bad question for Chat GPT. So, the business problem can be defined as an issue or challenge that hinders the achievements of the organizational goals or objectives. But this would indicate that your organization has goals and objectives. So you should start there first and figure out what your goals and objectives of the organization. It's a situation where the gap between the desired state and the current state needs to be addressed and improve the business performance. And I think those are great talking points to what you were saying earlier, Seth.
Yeah, but I think that like your question was not specific enough to ChatGPT.
What do you think I should change it to?
Like related to reporting, or like, because there are very large volumes of information around like solving big corporate definitions of what is your business problem, right?
Okay, all right. So
that's probably what it's like pulling its answer from. Yeah.
So I'm gonna see if I can get ChatGPT to refine the question a bit more, because my question was probably a bit too generic. So I added the how does this relate to analytics reporting? Oh, and now it's asking me more questions. Yeah,
it's asking you questions.
It's asking me. I'm now that it's trying to tell me what it wants to answer about.
Elevated.
Oh boy. All right. So I'm gonna enter in Dan Meisner's question here. The business problem that can
business intelligence. There you go. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for the save.
This is a business problem that can be solved by better business intelligence. We'll see that. Now, I am not paying for Chat GPT Pro or Premium, whatever it is. So it's a little bit slower than the other people who actually pay for Chat GPT. So it thinks a bit more whenever I give it a question. So we'll let it hang out here for a minute. What do we think Chat GPT should say? Because it's still thinking. It's taking forever. Have you noticed this? If you don't pay for it, like the first question is like super fast, and then every other question you ask it gets like a little bit slower, a little bit slower.
So while that's chewing, Andreas in LinkedIn asks, "What is a role of a Power BI analyst solving business problems?" And I think it's the same as everything we've discussed in this episode. The only difference would be that if like a business intelligence team or a BI developer would cross business units typically. Like they're going to be interacting with many other areas of the business, whereas a BI analyst typically, in my experience, would be very focused on a singular area of business. It may not be the case, but at the same time, an analyst building Power BI reports would be solving the same problems as a developer, right? Like typically the only difference between these folks is like which systems they're using for backend data, and enterprise systems are typically where you throw on a developer title versus an analyst is typically Excel and, more business side data sources. But the problems are fundamentally the same. And I think our discussion today would still revolve in them. The only difference would be like an analyst may be specifically focused more on a particular business unit as opposed to across them. That's my take on that.
All right, so I've taken Dan's question and I've bundled it back together and said, okay, what is a business problem that can be solved better using business intelligence? Business intelligence can provide many solutions to problems that business faces. Problems will include some of these problems include your limited access to data, performance management issues, and creating multiple systems that take too much time in tech terms to develop the reports. Your day-to-day operations are not organized, and clients will prefer your competitors. BI solutions help organizations to take data-driven decisions and combine them, data mining them, using analytics, data tools, and visualization to support those best practices. Okay, answer, I guess.
All right.
I'm not really loving the Chat GPT response on this one. I'd give it like a 5, maybe this time.
Great.
Meh.
It's a
That's why, meh. I didn't really love it. Well, with that lack of a lackluster ending of this episode, you guys can all now think about Tom Cruise and what it would be like for him to be in Moneyball and how much better of a movie that would have been had he been there. There probably would have been a couple more explosions, maybe, per se, and a couple of airplanes flying around. I'd like to see a helicopter in it, maybe. I'll actually have to go watch Moneyball now because I actually can speak to it later on. So anyways, all that being said, thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate your listenership. We had a good time, great discussion, and we'd only ask if you were listening to this, if you found some value from it, please let us know. Share it on social media. We'd really appreciate you sharing what you found valuable. So think about something here that you thought was awesome or not awesome, or another movie that you think we should talk about on the podcast, and share that out. And we'll try to discuss it in a future episode. Tommy, where else can we find the podcast?
Anywhere they are available: Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Make sure to subscribe. Also, watch us live Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7:30 a.m. Central.
Thank you all very much. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.